What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Several years ago, I made an episode where I answered the most Googled questions about therapists, and today I thought I would continue that thread, but typing into Google, why do therapists ... and then see what the auto suggest fills in and try to answer those questions. Now, considering that most people who are watching my content are therapists, I think that this is also really helpful for us to think about, like, what are people's questions, hang-up points, concerns, that sort of thing when it comes to therapists, so that we can have that awareness as we do our work with our clients. So the concept of this episode is very simple. I opened an incognito window, typed into a Google search, why do therapists, and then just looked at all of the auto-suggest, auto-filled questions that popped up, took a screenshot, and we're going to try to answer the questions that people typed into their Google searches. Okay, so the first thing that Google offered when I typed in, why does my therapist, was, why does my therapist want me to cry? My mind is going in a few different directions, because if somebody's typing this, like, did their therapist actually want that person to cry, or is that something they're perceiving about their therapist? But we're just going to answer it straight first, real quick. Like, why would a therapist want their client to cry? In contexts where I've personally wanted my client to cry, it's usually because they have some sort of mask or guard up, based on my perception. And a lot of the work that we're doing is helping their system reconnect the wires so that they can feel the emotions that they, for whatever reason, have disconnected from or masked or somehow, created some coping mechanism where their emotions aren't getting expressed. Now, with that said, this can quickly become problematic if it was like the therapist's only goal is for you to cry and they're like, now cry. Now cry, feel it, cry. You could make someone cry just by pushing them too hard that way. So yeah, don't do that. Now, with that said, the more nuanced thoughts that I have about this are that crying is not necessary to experience emotions. Imagine that some people can feel deeply and their tear ducts just don't make tears. So I think if a therapist is hoping that their client cries, they probably have a more nuanced view on this. It's not just like, check the box, my client now cried. Okay, the next Google auto-suggested question for why does my therapist is, why does my therapist ask the same question? I was kind of surprised by this one. Are a lot of therapists asking the same question? I don't know. But if we just took this question at face value, why would a therapist ask the same question? There could be any number of reasons, but the one that comes to mind most apparently to me is that the therapist is trying to see if they can help their client see a scenario from a different angle. This could apply to any question, really. The therapist may just genuinely be honoring the fact that, your answer to the question, how do you feel right now, might look very different than however you answered it 5 minutes ago. And it might be that, there's more than one way to look at any situation, and there's an invitation to see it from different angles. And I mean, let's be real, sometimes your therapist might ask the same question because they forgot, especially if it's just like informational, like there's not more than one angle to it, like, what's the name of your spouse or something like that. And then they ask the question again next time. That tells me more that, like, your therapist forgot the answer. Next question, classic. Why does my therapist stare at me in silence? Great question. First of all, not every therapist stares at their client in silence. And for those who do, hopefully they're not doing it like all day long. Sometimes I will stare in silence. It does happen. There are a lot of reasons why a therapist might do this. From a psychoanalytic approach, it might just be that you need to present as a sort of blank slate. And if you wait longer, then like more of the story is going to come out, or more of the reaction, or more of what's really going on will start to come out from our clients. But even kind of zooming out broader than that, like the idea of just not having to have something to say immediately in response to everything is a bit countercultural, at least in US Western culture. Maybe I might be staring at a client silently because I'm thinking about what they just said. Or maybe I'm just kind of letting it settle. Maybe I'm doing it for me. Maybe I'm doing it for them. Maybe I'm just waiting to see if there's anything else that they might say. Now, as is the case with most of these questions, there's always a caveat of like, this could be bad. If your therapist spends most of the session just staring at you silently, at some point that's not therapy anymore. So it needs to fit within an appropriate therapeutic dynamic. Okay, the next question is, why does my therapist take notes? Great question. I'd say most therapists take at least some notes during session. There are some therapists who don't take any notes at all. And if you're one of those folks, like, amazing. How? Really, we take notes so that we can remember stuff. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze like, they said this, but what they actually mean is this other deeper thing that they don't even know about. It's usually like this person's partner's name is Sam. Their kid is 4. And then I might have like 1 or 2 bullet points of like, these are the things we talked about today, so that later I can remember what we're doing in therapy. I can document what we did. And when we meet next time, I can go back and reference those notes and go, oh, right, this is what we're working on. And so this is where we're going to pick up from. This next question, I think, is pretty problematic out the gate. The question is, why does my therapist keep canceling? The emphasis is on keep. Because if we were to say, like, why does my therapist cancel sometimes? I might say, because they're a human being and everyone needs to cancel sometimes. But if you keep canceling, I'm concerned. There are some specific circumstances, I'm sure it'll happen to all of us at some point in our career, where it's a unique circumstance that requires us to cancel significantly more than we typically would. Like if you are going through some significant health scare, or a loved one that you are a caregiver for is going through something, you may be in a situation that's unique that requires you to cancel quite a bit. But if there truly is some life circumstance that is requiring you to cancel more regularly, I think it is really important that we let our clients know that something is going on outside of them. But with that said, if a client is Googling, why does my therapist keep canceling? That, like, I'm concerned. Like, that's telling me that that therapist kept canceling and they didn't give a reason to their clients, at least not one that was clear enough that satisfied them. Right now they're Googling it. I don't think our clients should ever be in a position where they're needing to turn to Google to say, like, why does my therapist keep canceling? It's also possible that the therapist is having some kind of reaction specific to the client that they're canceling on. Like, especially if they're just canceling on this client and not like canceling all their sessions. There's something that's unattended to in that relationship, in that therapeutic dynamic. And if you notice that you're canceling on a specific client over and over again, that is a great time to seek consultation, potentially bring it up in your own therapy work. But it is very important that we make sure we prioritize that client's care while tending to whatever we might be needing in that moment as well. The next question Google auto-suggested was, why does my therapist yawn? Which, like, as I go through these questions, I have to just chuckle at the idea of like, somebody was thinking about this enough that they took the time to type this in or, voice speak it into a Google search. So it's probably not that your therapist yawned one time, one day, and now you're Googling it. Listen, have I ever yawned regularly in session? Yes. When I had babies. When I had babies, I was not sleeping enough, period. I will say, if I'm yawning multiple times in a session, I will disclose to my client a tidbit about why I'm yawning to make clear that it's not because of them. And again, as with all of these other questions, it could be possible that a therapist is just yawning with this particular client and they might be noticing that and now Googling it. The next question is, why does my therapist want me to journal? Again, I feel like if you're getting to the point where you're now turning to Google and asking, why does my therapist want me to journal? Probably the therapist didn't quite explain it fully enough when they asked you to do it. Anytime we ask our client to do anything, journaling or otherwise, it's really good to give an explanation for why we're suggesting something. With that said, journaling can be quite helpful. Our thoughts have a way of like either looping on themselves where we just end up going around the same track over and over again without going anywhere new. It's just the same thoughts repeating in the same cycle. It's less typical that when we journal, we just go in an endless loop, because then you have like this tangible data of like your writing going in a loop, and it becomes much easier to allow your thought to continue in a new direction or to follow a thought to completion. These are all interesting, but the next question is, why does my therapist stare at me? There's quite a bit of research that making eye contact can actually take up so much, like the parts of our brain that go like, oh my goodness, someone's looking at me, and like we're looking into each other's eyes. Like it can take up so much of the like connective, relational oxytocin part of our brain that it can become more difficult to actually form our thoughts. And so that's why, talking to somebody in a car ride sometimes feels easier than sitting across from somebody. Or if we're thinking about something, we might like look up or look away, look down, because when we're looking at somebody in the eyes, it's hard to focus on other things. That's just kind of how we're wired. With that said, that's partly why your therapist might be just like making eye contact with you as a connective approach. But yeah, too much eye contact is uncomfortable. But I don't know, it's like some of this could be like cultural, some of it could be generational. And then the word stare versus just eye contact. Like, yeah, if you're just staring at somebody saying nothing, that does feel uncomfortable. Then it just sort of feels intimidating. Like, why are you staring at me? Do something. Okay, and the last question is, why does my therapist talk about herself? If we offer the benefit of the doubt to whoever therapist this would be, this is lots of people typing in this question about their therapist. Therapists do, if they choose, self-disclose if and when they believe it's to the benefit of the client. However, there is a limit to this. Personally, I do talk about myself sometimes. And there are times where like I'll be talking with a client and acknowledging some kind of self-disclosure often can like help the conversation move along or help the client feel seen. And there's always that check. If I'm about to disclose something about myself, it runs through that filter of like, is this truly going to be helpful to my client to say this right now? And if it's unknown, I skip it, or I say I can always wait till later. But I've had therapists who will disclose for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes. I had one therapist one time talk about her life thing for 40 minutes. And that is just not appropriate. That's not therapy. That's not ethical and very concerning. So if you're getting to the point where your therapist is talking about themselves enough that you're having to Google it, at the very least, that would be a good opportunity to check in with your therapist about that and say, hey, I noticed that you've been sharing about yourself quite a bit, and either I don't like it or, whatever is happening as a result of that that's concerning. That would be a good opportunity to bring it up with them, and I hope they can handle it. And if they're defensive, then that is not your fault. Well, I feel like I had a lot more to say about these things than I realized. I'm curious what your answers would be to some of these questions. Like, why do therapists do some of these things? Do you do some of these things? And for most of these things, they have pretty nuanced answers. Like most of us do these things, at least sometimes, and we might have good reasons for it. And sometimes the reasons might be worth looking a little bit more closely at. Well, I hope you found this episode helpful. I find it helpful just to see what sorts of questions people end up asking in Google about therapists, to say like, oh, okay, these are things that are flagging for some reason or another. Let's be aware of those and know that, either we might be doing some of these things and not even realizing that it's potentially affecting our clients enough that they're doing a Google search about it. Or that, our new clients coming in who've seen therapists before may have experienced some of these things in the past. And maybe that we might be doing some of these things and not even realizing it. And then it might be helpful to just be mindful of them, because they're not necessarily bad things, but it's helpful to understand like how our clients might be experiencing some of these things. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring this video. TherapyNotes helps with all of your practice management needs, from scheduling to notes to billing. They have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform included for free for all users, and a whole suite of AI features to streamline your note-taking process. If you'd like to check out TherapyNotes, you can get 2 months to try all of these features for free with no commitment, just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Well, I had fun putting this episode together, taking a look at all of these Googled questions about why does my therapist do that? And if I skipped over some important things to consider in response to some of these questions, chime in the comments so that we don't miss any important details, because I'm just one person, okay? And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.